Welcome to the Weekend Brief with Bharat.Law. I am your host, Nyai, bringing you a comprehensive summary of the key legal issues, decisions, and important facts from the Supreme Court of India for the week of May 18th, 2026. This week, the Supreme Court delivered major judgments spanning public safety, criminal law, civil rights, and commercial disputes. Let us dive right in. We begin with a major public safety ruling concerning the nationwide stray dog crisis. In the Suo case, City Hounded by Strays versus the state of Andhra Pradesh, the court ruled that the fundamental right to life and safety under Article 21 of the Constitution overrides animal welfare regulations. The court prohibited the re-release of sterilized stray dogs back into institutional areas with vulnerable populations, such as schools, hospitals, and railway stations. The judgment mandates that every district must establish at least one fully functional animal birth control center. Moving on to criminal law, the Supreme Court clarified important principles regarding bail, especially under strict statutes like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or UAP Act. In Syed Iftikhar Andrabi versus National Investigation Agency, the court granted bail to an accused in a terror funding case who had been in pre-trial detention for over 5 years. The court held that the constitutional right to a speedy trial under Article 21 overrides the strict bail restrictions under Section 43D(5) of the UAPA when a trial is unduly delayed. Similarly, in Shri versus State, represented by the Inspector of Police, the court acquitted a Sri Lankan refugee charged under the UAPA due to mistaken identity. The prosecution relied on witnesses who only identified him after his arrest, and the police failed to conduct a test identification parade. The court ruled that identity must be established beyond reasonable doubt, and late improvements in witness testimony are unreliable. Under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, the court issued a critical procedural safeguard in Parvinder Singh versus Enforcement Directorate. The court ruled that under the new Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, or BNSS, an accused has the right to be heard before a court takes cognizance of an offence. This applies to PMLA proceedings if the court takes cognizance after the BNSS came into force, even if the complaint was filed earlier. The court was also strict on bail cancellations this week. In Bhagat Singh versus the state of Uttar Pradesh, the High Court had granted bail to a murder accused simply because he was not named in the initial inquest report. The Supreme Court cancelled this bail, clarifying that an inquest report is only meant to record the apparent cause of death, and omission of the accused's name does not override strong evidence like FIR and weapon recoveries. In Mohsin versus the state of Uttar Pradesh, an accused whose bail had been cancelled by the Supreme Court went absconding and defied court orders. The High Court later granted him bail again. The Supreme Court cancelled it a second time, stating that evading arrest is contumacious conduct that heavily weighs against granting bail, and bail cannot be granted after Supreme Court cancellation without compelling new circumstances. On the administrative powers of high courts during bail hearings, the court laid down boundaries in Ram Balak versus State of Uttar Pradesh. While rejecting a bail plea, the Allahabad High Court had issued sweeping administrative directions to the police regarding the execution of summons. The Supreme Court struck this down, ruling that a court's bail jurisdiction is limited to the grant or denial of bail and cannot be used to mandate systemic administrative reforms. In economic offences, the court addressed the issue of multiple FIRs in Amit Katal versus State of Haryana. The directors of a real estate company faced multiple FIRs in Delhi and Haryana for the same housing project delay. The court directed the clubbing of these FIRs under one investigating agency to prevent multiplicity of proceedings and harassment of the accused. In Su Santakumar Dalai versus State of Odisha, the court discharged a forest officer accused of corruption because the charge sheet only contained vague, group based allegations without specifying his individual role. The court reinforced that criminal proceedings cannot continue without specific culpability. The court also delivered important verdicts on the appreciation of evidence. In state of Tamil Nadu versus Ponusami, the Supreme Court restored the trial court's murder conviction of several accused, overturning a high court acquittal. The court held that an approver's testimony remains reliable even if it improves after being granted a pardon, as long as it is backed by independent corroborating evidence. In a landmark ruling on digital privacy and intimidation, Vijay Kumar versus State of Tamil Nadu, the court upheld a conviction for criminal intimidation under Section 506 of the Indian Penal Code. The accused had threatened to upload a private video of a woman bathing to social media. The court held that such a threat amounts to imputing unchastity, violating her dignity and privacy, even if the video was taken during a consensual relationship. On circumstantial evidence, we saw two contrasting outcomes based on the chain of facts. In Papan Sarkar versus State of West Bengal, the accused were acquitted of murder because the time gap in the last seen together theory was too wide. Furthermore, extrajudicial confessions made under mob pressure were deemed inherently unreliable. Conversely, in Chetan Dashrath Gade versus State of Maharashtra, a husband's conviction for murdering his wife was upheld based on circumstantial evidence. While the husband claimed she died by hanging, medical evidence proved she died by strangulation. His failure to explain the injuries and missing jewelry completed the chain of guilt. In Roshan Lal versus State of Haryana, the court reduced a conviction from attempt to murder under Section 307 of IPC to voluntarily causing grievous hurt under Section 325 IPC. The court observed that the assault was a spontaneous reaction during a dispute, lacking premeditation or the specific intent to kill required for an attempt to murder charge. Lastly, for criminal law, in Mahadevna DM versus State of Karnataka, a bus driver convicted of a fatal accident was spared prison time. The court granted him probation under the Probation of Offenders Act 1958 and ordered him to pay 5 lakh rupees in compensation to the victim's family, emphasizing restorative justice over punitive measures for accidents lacking malicious intent. Moving to civil and property disputes, in Braun Mumbai Municipal Corporation versus Vijayanagar Apartments, the court ruled on transferable development rights, or TDR. The BMC had forced landowners to sign an agreement waiving their right to additional TDR for developing a garden on surrendered land. The Supreme Court held that statutory compensation rights under the law cannot be waived by private agreements. Furthermore, a delay in claiming this compensation does not defeat the right. In Jennifer Meshes versus Leonard G. Lobo, the court clarified the execution of preliminary decrees. The court held that if a preliminary decree for property partition contains clear directions, such as ordering a public auction because physical division is impossible, it can be executed directly without waiting for a formal final decree. In Parvati Nerati versus Lakshmi Nerati, the court upheld the validity of a will where a man left his property to his sister, excluding his wife and children. The court stated that excluding natural heirs is not inherently suspicious if the will clearly states that adequate provisions were already made for them. In Mallika versus R Nallitambe, a property dispute hinged on whether a power of attorney was given for a loan or a property sale. The Supreme Court dismissed the plaintiff's case primarily because she failed to enter the witness box to testify. The court drew an adverse inference against her, stating that parties with special knowledge of the facts cannot avoid testifying. In the realm of service law, the Supreme Court made a significant shift regarding promotions. In State of Odisha versus Shripati Ranjan Das, the court officially overruled the old Rangaya precedent. The court held that an employee only has the right to be considered for promotion under the rules that are in force at the time of consideration, not the rules that existed when the vacancy first arose. In Sukhendu Bhattacharya versus State of Assam, the court directed the regularization of long-serving temporary workers. The state had excluded them due to clerical errors, while regularizing thousands of others under a 2005 cabinet policy. The court ruled that the famous Umadavi judgment does not prohibit the implementation of pre-existing executive policies, and the state cannot treat equals unequally. In Manoj Kumar Raut versus State of Uttar Pradesh, a waitlisted candidate for a college principal post sought reassignment after failing to join his original posting. By the time he applied, the old act governing appointments had been repealed. The court ruled that actions cannot be taken under repealed acts once new laws are in force. In Vice Chancellor, Rajiv Gandhi National Aviation University versus Jitendra Singh, the court examined who has the power to fire an employee appointed under transitional provisions. The court clarified that the appointing authority, in this case the President of India acting as visitor, retains the inherent power to remove the appointee unless the statute explicitly says otherwise. Finally, in commercial and regulatory matters, in RR Constructions versus Gayatri Ventures, a bidder was disqualified from a government tender for submitting an earnest money deposit as a fixed deposit instead of a demand draft. The Supreme Court set aside the disqualification, noting that the tender document used the word may, meaning the use of a demand draft was optional, not mandatory. And in Punjab State Power Corporation Limited versus Talwandi Sabo Power Limited, the court imposed a strict penalty on a power generation company. The company failed to demonstrate its declared electricity generation capacity when asked by the Load Dispatch Center. The court ruled this failure carries strict liability under the State Grid Code. The penalty is a civil breach, and the authorities do not need to prove intentional gaming or bad intent to impose the fine. That wraps up our summary of the Supreme Court's key decisions for this week. From ensuring public safety against stray animals to protecting digital privacy and clarifying the boundaries of bail and service rules, it has been a week of defining legal precedents. Log on to Bharat.Law for updated research, document intelligence, court notifications, and elevate your legal practice with trusted AI. Until next week, this is Nyay, your trusted AI on Bharat.Law.